instruments don't matter, it's the intention that counts. You've probably seen that in recent years there's a new wave of electric guitarists, especially here on YouTube. Players like Nichika Ito, Tim Henson and of course Matteo Mancuso. What do they all have in common? They're adapting classical techniques to electric guitar and audiences can't get enough. There's a good reason for this. Classical techniques make a whole lot of sense and you can do a whole lot with them. They're the key to playing complex, multi-layered polyphonic music, techniques refined by countless guitarists over centuries. The simple truth is, if you actually want to learn to play like this new generation of players, learning your usual licks and tricks on the electric guitar will not get you there. You should really start by getting to know classical guitar. They did too. Classicals and steel string guitars are nowadays seen as basically separate instruments. It was not always like this, and the split was deliberate and orchestrated. Back in the day there was just guitar. No separation between classical and popular styles. Also historically it was usually seen as a working class instrument. Easy to carry, practical, but not as capable as the shiny elite. If a guitarist wanted to be taken seriously, they needed good arguments. The latest and greatest attempt was made by classical guitar's overlord, Andres Segovia, and part of his strategy was to basically say, yes, I'm a guitarist, but I'm not like those other ones. This escape actually worked, kinda. And nowadays you can study classical guitar in universities, just like a real instrument. Electric guitar, not so much, at least not yet. But they also didn't care because it became just a bit more popular. This split between classical and popular styles was huge for a really long time. This is hard for us to understand from a modern perspective, but you could still see it in England with the whole progressive rock versus punk rock thing. Punk rockers were very much against classical music. They saw it as part of the establishment, even though this was probably a bit of an unfair generalization even in the 70s. Meanwhile, prog rockers wanted to bridge the gap between the worlds. Take Steve Hackett of Genesis, who even snuck a full-on classical guitar piece on one of their early albums. The same Steve Hackett that is nowadays famous as one of the great innovators of electric guitar technique. This is of course no accident. It's in large part because he managed to apply century-old principles to the newer instrument. Nowadays, the divide is dying. And incidentally, when I hear people trash-talking classical guitar for being uncool or snobby, it's never the younger generation saying it. To the youngest kids, both classical and rock are both just old music. Neither one carries any special connotation anymore. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. It's way easier now to convince people to at least start out learning on the classical guitar, which I think is great for most beginners. If you start with classical and you do it properly, you're more likely to learn the fundamentals really well, and that opens up tons of doors for whatever style you want to play later. You can really see these walls breaking down everywhere you look. The new generation of guitarists doesn't care as much about staying in their lane. Classical players like Gigi and Sean Shibe are doing great with electric guitar, and they're just a small part of the whole deal. We could talk about this whole semi-acoustic fingerstyle scene too, but that's honestly worth its own video. Let's stick with these examples for now. Electric guitar as a class of instrument goes really beyond just the guitar itself. Electric players usually spend large amounts of time and effort into modifying their signal chain with different pickups, amplification, effect, and countless gadgets. A player like Matteo Mancuso signifies a bit of a step back from the gear obsession in this world, and his technique fundamentals are really there. We're seeing very deliberate economical movements, a well-balanced left hand, and awesome coordination. Besides the typical classical techniques, he is also often employing right-hand tapping to achieve this remarkable speed without having to rely on superior reflexes. You can, by the way, do tapping on a classical guitar too, it's just that without a pickup we will always hear resonance from both parts of the string, which makes the tappings always sound a bit dissonant. But in principle it's all possible. Again, actually not the worst idea to initially practice this on a nylon, because it requires us to be very precise and coordinated to make it sound good, which will make it a lot more reliable on the steel strings too, where it's generally more forgiving. Back to Mancuso. It's really about the coordination rather than just firing super fast muscle fibers, which is also what we always want to achieve in classical pedagogy. All of this requires the musicians to be more introverted on stage. We won't see them doing the crab or crowd surfing very often. They're busy enough focusing on their fingers. It signifies a shift in how the audience behaves too. It's really a bit the reinvention of the classical concert virtuoso. Been there, seen that. I guess soon we'll be shushing each other sitting in comfy theater chairs, waiting for the metal riff maestro to begin his solo recital. As odd as that sounds, but I really don't think this future is that unlikely. For the classical players that want to try out an electric guitar, I really want to encourage to just grab one. Of course, it's a good thing to know how to use a plectrum, and you can do some things with it that you can't do as easily with your fingers. But it's really not necessary. Just start by playing any electric guitar like you would your classical and have fun. Actually, let's just do that here and compare it with a classical piece. I want to play something that would sound good on both instruments, something that is not too hard if you're coming from classical, but something that still sounds great. A good value piece, if you will, the most bang for the buck. Something that shows various techniques and how they sound on each instrument. Tango on Sky is really perfect for this. I'd say it's intermediate level, but it actually sounds very impressive. It's exactly the kind of piece that should make electric guitarists go, oh, maybe I should learn some classical technique. The first thing you'll notice is how notes just hang in the air forever on the electric. It actually makes connecting melody notes easier in the opening section. It's interesting. I have to say though that I find it a lot easier to separate the voices dynamically on the classical guitar. The electric guitar is very quick at saturating everything, and especially middle registers can be very overwhelming quickly. Generally, the left hand is quite a bit easier on the electric guitar. If you have even a half-decent classical technique, getting the notes out just as you want them is a lot easier than on my classical guitar. Interestingly, without using distortion or anything, it is not that easy to get a really sharp and aggressive accent on an electric guitar. It's easier on the nylon string, I would say. To get a nice tone, at least what I as a classical player consider a nice tone, I try to play up near the neck pickup or even over the fretboard. And I'm barely touching the strings. If you played that softly on a classical guitar, you would not hear anything, I think. That's, by the way, also why my nails aren't getting destroyed. If I used the same attack as on nylon strings, they would just get obliterated immediately. Now, sure, we're doing this comparison without effects on the electric guitar. You could theoretically add effects to a classical guitar too, though, if you put a pickup on it, but that's not really the point. The reason we classical guitarists sometimes torture ourselves with technique isn't about avoiding technology. It's about getting the most immediate connection between what's in our head and what comes out of the guitar, and for that nothing beats just strings and wood, no extra effects, nothing against them in principle though, of course. I'm making this video to show you can use classical technique on electric guitar too. Whatever guitar you're playing, try to get your best sound just using your hands and your brain first. Getting good at this on classical guitar makes you better on any other type of guitar too. There's sometimes pieces from classical guitar standard repertoire that could even make more sense to play on an electric. Take the second Brouwer etude. It's supposed to be this really slow and solemn choral. Getting that kind of choir-like sustain is just not feasible on the nylon string. This way we can play the piece and even exaggerate its initial intention. Little detour here and a continuation of the prog rock from the 70s. None other than Randy Rhoads let the worlds collide again by quoting Brouwer's 6th etude in the intro to Diary of a Madman. Actually, the worlds were never fully separate, thankfully. Most of our repertoire I of course still prefer on the classical guitar, no worries. There's just so much you can do with dynamics and immediate nuanced tone colors that I'm missing on the electric. Also with the Tango on Sky, but let me know what you think. You can listen to the entire session to compare for yourself at the end of this video. Thank you so much to Tonebase for making these videos possible. If you're a classical guitarist looking for the most diverse and varied output, or if you're an electric guitarist that wants to experience the vast world of classical guitar music, I highly recommend you to check out Tonebase Premium. It is by far the most comprehensive platform for all knowledge classical guitar, with an immense catalog of masterclasses, live streams, sheet music, practice plans, a 12-level advancement system and many more things. Check it out at the link in the video description. Let us know in the comments what you think about this topic. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking around. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and now you can listen to some fake leather tango on 2 guitars.